Real people, real opinions.
Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.
You may have heard the story, and we heard the news today, that Lucy Letby is going to face a retrial on one count of attempted murder. Now, this is a case that has fascinated and horrified many of us. The nurse was convicted in England last month of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 6 others. But jurors couldn't decide a verdict on the 6 other charges. Because of the retrial, we are now limited in the media in terms of what we can and cannot say. But we know this is of huge interest to many of you. So joining me on the line is the co-host of the podcast, The Trial of Lucy Letby, and Caroline Cheetham joins me. Caroline, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Caroline, this case has certainly captured everybody's interests. I mean, here we have a 33-year-old woman, and I know we're limited in what we could talk about, so maybe you could remind our listeners who are not up to speed or not familiar with the case of what she's been accused of, what she was charged with, what she was found guilty of, and why we're now in the situation we're in today, and why there's a retrial.
Yeah, sure. So as you outlined at the top there, actually, that Lucy Letby was charged with 22 counts in total, and about sort of 4-6 weeks ago, the jury returned verdicts on 16 counts in that case. As you said, 7 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. That was against 6 different babies. And what we were obviously aware of at the time was that the jury couldn't decide on verdicts in 6 other cases and 6 other charges. So what we knew was going to happen was that today was the deadline, if you like, for the prosecution to decide and to come back to court to sort of clarify whether they were going to seek a retrial on any of those outstanding charges that the jury decided they couldn't reach charges, convictions, absolutely for. And what we were told today in court, and in fact Lucy Letby appeared via video link in court to hear this, was that they were going to seek a retrial on just one of those counts, and that's the attempted murder of baby Kay, a baby girl who was born in February 2016.
Lucy Letby, throughout the whole thing, and even after she was convicted, since then has proclaimed her innocence, as has her friends, who have been quite outspoken to the media as well in relation to this. What was her demeanour in court today?
We could see her on video link. She was sitting in a small room with a guard, a prison officer sitting behind her. She was very calm. She was dressed in a blue top, a zip, almost like a tracksuit top. A drink of water and some tissues on the table, a sort of loo roll, if you like, on the table. She was very calm, only spoke to confirm that, who she was and that she could hear and see all the proceedings on the video link. That was from Newhall Prison over in Wakefield. As you say there, she has all the time protested her innocence, and the trial was a trial because she said she was not guilty of the charges. What we now know, we found out just a week or so ago, her solicitor, her barrister, Ben Myers-Casey, has now lodged an application to seek grounds for an appeal. Now, that process isn't a fast one, and it doesn't mean there is an appeal. What it means is he's filled in various bits of paperwork to say he thinks there are grounds for an appeal, and he's outlined what they are. And he is now that's going to go to a judge in the Court of Appeal. That judge will make a decision if there are any grounds on which she can appeal.
Is she? I'm sorry for interrupting, but is she going to appeal all the charges, or is she going to appeal the ones in the retrial? So I'm a bit confused. So is she going to appeal all of the charges? Because as we know, she got a whole of life sentence for murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 6 others. So is she going to appeal all of those charges and verdicts?
So as you say, she got 14 whole life terms for those convictions. We actually don't know the grounds for the appeal, and we won't know them unless the judge decides there are grounds. So if the judge says in the Court of Appeal there are no grounds for this appeal, we'll never find out what Ben Myers was saying were the grounds for the appeal. If it's granted and it goes through to an appeal court judge or a panel of appeal court judges, actually could be up to 5 judges that makes that decision actually in the end, we'll then find out what those grounds are. Now, just to clarify your point, it's not on the retrial because, of course, that's not a conviction yet.
Okay.
This will be an appeal against the charges that she has been convicted of thus far.
And I know Nicholas Johnson KC, the prosecuting service, said he confirmed that the Crown was not pursuing a retrial on the other 5 outstanding allegations involving 2 baby girls and 2 baby boys. So it's estimated, but the retrial and the one you spoke about a minute ago could take up to 3 weeks. So do we know when that's going to happen?
So, yeah, you're right. At the moment, certainly, on those 5 other charges, there is no plan currently to seek a retrial on those 5 outstanding charges. Just this one charge of attempted murder. What was deemed today was that partly the huge backlog in the courts, to be honest, that's going to delay things. We're expecting it to be about June 2024. There's a couple of things here to think about. One is, as we said, the backlog in the court process. There's a lot of cases to be heard.
Yeah.
The other thing the judge was cognizant of, actually, was this grounds for appeal, this possible appeal that this application that she's put in. He wants to know what happens with that before he commences any sort of retrial on an outstanding charge. So you've got a few processes running in parallel here. You've got this application for an appeal, which is going through the courts at the moment, and we'll see what happens with that over the next 4 to 6 months. And running alongside that, you've now got the prosecution saying they're going to seek this retrial on the attempted murder of baby Kay. So a couple of things running in tandem, but I think what's going to happen is we'll find out first about if there are any grounds for an appeal before we then deal with that retrial.
I know Jonathan Storer, who is the chief Crown prosecutor, said decisions on whether to seek the retrials were extremely complex, but he said that before reaching any conclusions, they would have to listen to the views of the families affected. And this must be heartbreaking for all of those families, mothers in particular, who had the babies. It must be heartbreaking for them to hear this news.
Yeah, we heard from one of the solicitors actually representing many of those families very soon after this was announced today. And they did outline that they were very disappointed, that they were hoping that, retrials would be sought on all of those cases. And that's obviously not going to happen. The CPS, as you've alluded to, Jonathan's story, says they're balancing, lots of different things in these decisions, including the views of the families in this case. But this is the decision they've come to. We know those families via their solicitor are disappointed. But of course, you've got these other processes running as well. What you've also got, of course, is this public inquiry, which we're also aware is going to get underway. That as well is being led by a judge and will be in public at some point in the coming
Will that have
months.
to be delayed now? If there's indeed a retrial or if indeed there's an appeal, does that have to get delayed because of obvious sub judice? So will that get delayed?
It's a really good question. We don't know. We spoke to, on the podcast, we spoke to an eminent Casey, Mary Pryor, a couple of weeks ago, and she said it would be up to the judge leading the inquiry whether he or she, well, actually it's a she, we do know who that is, Lady Justice Thirlwall, whether she decided she wanted to halt the process of that inquiry while the criminal justice system and the appeal system was running its course. Then again, it's up to the judge. That judge will also be cognizant of the fact that these families don't want further hold-ups. They want answers. They've waited a very, very long time. So it's a balance, isn't it, between doing it right, following the processes, getting it right. They've waited for so long. They don't now want it to be done in a rushed fashion. They want it to be done properly. But, more delays just adds to their heartbreak.
And how is that affecting reporting and talking about the murders in the United Kingdom? Because I know in relation to sub judice laws here, it does have a profound effect on what you can and can't say, obviously. But in relation to leaving aside baby Kay and the retrial, in relation to the appeal obviously hasn't gone forward yet in relation to the rest of them. So does that limit what you can even say about the original charges?
It does, and you might allude that I'm being quite careful in our conversation this evening.
As am I.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, as we've got to be, because as journalists, as broadcasters, we absolutely would never do anything to prejudice a fair trial. That's absolutely part of our job. We're part of the process in that sense. The judge made it very clear today that he had a balance to strike between the fact that the convictions in this case, as you said it at the outset, and as I've confirmed, the convictions in this case stand. We have all reported them. They've been widely shared. That stands. That reporting will not be removed from the internet.
That's what I was going to say, because there's nothing really we can say that hasn't been said already, if you understand what I'm saying. So I find it unusual in this particular case, when it's all been done and dusted, where the trial has already happened. I know that there's obviously going to be the retrial and the appeal, but it's kind of difficult to see how sub judice would come into that at that stage.
The jury will be told the jury in the new trial will be told to disregard anything of the previous trial. It will all be based on new evidence put to them in a new trial. And the judge, you've got to be realistic. There is mountains of coverage out there, and that's not going to go away, and it can't be removed. So the judge, that being said, what he made very clear today is that we are now back in contempt of court territory. So we must not say or do anything that would prejudice that future trial. So what he's made clear is nothing we say going forward now from this point onwards. And of course, the lawyers who help us on the Trial of Lucy Letby podcast have been advising us a lot today on our final episode, what we can, what we can't say, because we're now in very, very different territory. And frankly, if a judge says to a bunch of journalists in a courtroom, you must not report anything, in terms of evidence, in terms of the detail, that could influence this trial. Well, we are going to absolutely abide by that.
No, you don't want to be before a judge for contempt of court. That's the last thing you want to.
Really, really don't. And nor, more importantly, to be fair, do we want to influence a trial, because there's so much at stake for lots and lots and lots of different people on this. So yeah, we're back in contempt of court territory, which means that from our perspective, as the host of and the producers of the podcast, we now pause. So today was our last episode for a while. We were always going to bring it to a close at some point in the next few days or weeks, but it felt the right time today. We heard today about this retrial. So we've now done a pause on the podcast, because also we don't also want to in any way prejudice future proceedings. So we will see what happens in the coming weeks and months.
Let's just hope that justice prevails, because that's all we can ask for, is that justice prevails, and that everybody obviously behaves themselves in the interim, because we do want to make sure there's a fair trial for the sake of everybody, particularly the victims in this particular trial. Listen,
Absolutely.
Caroline, thank you very much indeed, and I appreciate you coming on the air to discuss it. Caroline Cheetham, who is a co-host of the podcast, if you're more interested in that. And the name of the podcast, by the way, is The Trial of Lucy Letby.
Real people, real opinions.
Real Talk Radio, the multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.